Okay, so today we're diving deep into Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. And wow, you guys sent in some fascinating stuff for this one. We've got old maps, recent articles, all kinds of things. Clearly, you want more than just the basics, and you definitely came to the right place.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how all these different sources show us different sides of Sheepshead Bay, almost like we're peeling back layers of time.
Exactly. And I guess there's no better place to start than with the name itself, right? Sheepshead Bay. I mean, that's not your typical neighborhood name.
It definitely makes you wonder, doesn't it? And actually, the story behind the name tells us a lot about the heart of this place. So the bay and then the whole area got its name from this really unusual local, the sheepshead fish.
And these weren't your average goldfish, right? The sources mentioned they had rows of teeth, almost like human teeth. Kind of creepy, if you ask me.
Yeah, can you picture it? Early Sheepshead Bay, this peaceful little fishing village, and these toothy fish were everywhere. It's a far cry from the busy neighborhood we know today.
Totally different. But even back then, it seems like Sheepshead Bay had something special. The sources talk about early tourism, people wanting to escape the city.
That's right. I guess some things never change. People were already drawn to the good food and nice breezes. And that's a direct quote, by the way.
Yeah.
That desire for a little escape, it's timeless.
Makes you want to hop on a trolley and see it for yourself, right? And speaking of which, the arrival of those railroads and streetcars, that was a game changer.
Completely changed everything. Imagine, this isolated village suddenly becomes easy to reach for tons of people.
Mm.
It wasn't just about convenience. It brought a whole new crowd to Sheepshead Bay, people from the city looking for a break. And that changed the whole feel of the place.
And I bet no change was bigger than the Sheepshead Bay Race Track, right? That wasn't just a hobby, it was a whole event.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking 112 acres of pure excitement right by the water. It drew in everyone, from the city's elite to everyday people looking for some fun.
One source even called it a magnificent park with a grand view of the Atlantic. But this is what gets me. They built entire railroad lines just to get people to and from the races.
That shows you just how important the racetrack was. It put Sheepshead Bay on the map, not just locally, but as a real destination. It was a sign of the good times.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all that excitement, but, good times don't always last. Those railroad lines, the ones built just for the racetrack, kind of make you think about how things can change, don't they?
It's true, isn't it? What made the racetrack so popular almost led to its downfall. So 1908, New York State passes a law, and it basically makes racetrack betting illegal. Huge blow to the sport.
So no more big bets, no more need for all those extra trains. It really shows how things outside of a neighborhood can have a big impact, huh?
Definitely. But here's the thing. What's really interesting is how Sheepshead Bay reacted.
Right.
Instead of just giving up, they decided to try something totally different, something called a motordrome.
Okay, now this I gotta hear more about. A motordrome. Sounds kind of wild, especially back then. What were they thinking?
So picture this, a track made of wood, banked at a steep angle, built for motorcycle racing, and I mean high speeds. It was dangerous, exciting, totally different from horse racing, but maybe they were trying to recreate that same thrill.
I can almost hear it now. Engines roaring instead of hooves pounding. The crowd's going crazy. So did it work? Did they get that spark back?
Sadly, no. The motordrome didn't last long. It seemed like Sheepshead Bay was having trouble finding its place in a changing world. And then there's the whole Coney Island situation.
Ah, right. Coney Island, the entertainment capital right next door. Tough competition for anyone.
Exactly. Coney Island was becoming the place to be. Amusement parks, attractions, easy to get to by subway. Sheepshead Bay was kind of stuck in its shadow. Might have even contributed to its decline in those early 1900s.
Makes you wonder what could have been if things were different, right? But even with all the ups and downs, some things survived. One name that keeps popping up in the sources is Lundy's.
Lundy's, yeah. More than just a restaurant. It became like a symbol of Sheepshead Bay. That spirit of toughness, of coming back from hard times.
And this wasn't just any restaurant. The sources make it sound pretty impressive.
Okay, so you walk into Lundy's, right? Huge space, tons of people, this amazing Spanish colonial architecture. It was a big deal, bustling, full of energy, just like Sheepshead Bay itself.
And it sounds like Lundy's had its share of excitement, too. Robberies, strikes, even a ceiling collapse. They'd seen it all.
But they always bounce back. What's really interesting is how Lundy's story connects with the changing demographics of Sheepshead Bay. For example, they hired a lot of African Americans, which was unusual back then. Shows how the neighborhood was changing, too.
It's a bigger story, isn't it? Trying to keep a local institution going when the world's changing all around you. Lundy's closes in '79, reopens in the '90s, then closes again. Kind of mirrors Sheepshead Bay's own ups and downs.
Right on. And speaking of recurring themes, there's one challenge that seems to never go away.
You talking about the parking situation? Sounds like it's been a headache in Sheepshead Bay forever.
It's more than just a small annoyance, though, right? I think it says something about a bigger issue, a struggle that a lot of cities face.
Okay, now you've got me curious. What can parking tell us about the bigger picture in Sheepshead Bay?
Think of it like this. Parking represents this ongoing battle between keeping things the same and moving forward. You've got residents who need a place to park, businesses that need customers to be able to get to them, and then the fishing fleet, they need access to the water.
It's tough to make everyone happy, especially while trying to keep the neighborhood's character. But before we get too far into the present, let's rewind a bit. Remember those sheepshead fish, the ones that gave the bay its name?
Oh, yeah. Well, they've been spotted in Jamaica Bay recently, a good sign for a species that used to be everywhere in these waters.
It's almost like poetry, right? Sheepshead Bay, this place constantly changing, reconnects with its roots through the return of its namesake. It makes you think, what else is out there? What other hidden stories are waiting to be discovered in this ever-changing neighborhood? It really is something how those sheepshead fish keep popping up, like a reminder that Sheepshead Bay is connected to its past. But speaking of connections, our research turned up some really cool hidden gems in this neighborhood, places that give us a peek into all the different sides of Sheepshead Bay.
Yeah, and it's amazing how these little hidden spots often connect to these bigger historical stories. Like take the Wyckoff Bennett homestead, for example.
Even while I was prepping for this episode, I was surprised to learn about that one. A house from the Revolutionary War era, right in the middle of everything. You can't help but think about the people who lived there, the history in those walls.
You can practically feel it, can't you?
Yeah.
All those layers of time. It makes you realize there's more to Sheepshead Bay than just being a busy resort town.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Holocaust Memorial Park. It's a quiet place, a reminder of all those immigrants who came to Sheepshead Bay.
It really makes you think about all the different stories that make up Sheepshead Bay. It's a place that's welcomed people from all over looking for a fresh start, a better life, and they all added to this mix of cultures that make it so special today.
Absolutely. And speaking of cultures, we can't forget about this vibrant little corner of Sheepshead Bay that a lot of people don't even know about. Avenue U Chinatown.
It's funny. It challenges what some people might think about the neighborhood. Shows that Sheepshead Bay is full of surprises. A place where different cultures come together and, oh, the food. I bet you could spend a week there just trying all the different things.
Don't even get me started on the food. Avenue U Chinatown is a foodie's paradise. Seriously.
Oh,
It shows how food brings people together, creates this sense of community.
I'm adding that to my list of places to check out for sure. But while we were digging through all this info, we came across some familiar names connected to Sheepshead Bay.
Yeah, a pretty eclectic mix, actually. Larry David, the genius behind Seinfeld, he grew up in Sheepshead Bay. And Vince Lombardi, the legendary football coach, he was born and raised right here, too. Oh, and believe it or not, even Judge Judy has ties to Sheepshead Bay.
It makes you wonder, what was it about this place that drew in such different people? Maybe it's that toughness, that ability to change and adapt that really speaks to people who want to make their mark.
Right. It's like Sheepshead Bay has this pull. It doesn't fit neatly into any one box. History, culture, even a little bit of star power. It's both familiar and unpredictable, all at the same time. And that leads us to our final thought for you to chew on.
I'm ready.
So, Sheepshead Bay, they've been through a lot, right? Good times, bad times, they've seen it all. But what about the future? Can they keep what makes them special with all the changes happening? Can they find that balance between taking care of the people who live there and holding on to their history and charm?
That's a big question, isn't it? And it's not just about Sheepshead Bay either. It's something cities all over the world are dealing with. How do you respect the past while moving towards the future? How do you build places that are lively and sustainable, welcoming and authentic?
Those are tough questions, and the answers are always changing. But maybe by looking at the history of places like Sheepshead Bay, by finding those hidden gems and really thinking about those unanswered questions, we can understand a little better what shapes our cities and even ourselves.
It's a good reminder that every neighborhood has a story to tell, a history to explore. So next time you're walking by the water in Sheepshead Bay or trying to find a parking spot, take a minute to think about all that history right there beneath your feet. You never know what you might discover.